Good evening and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for June 1st, 2020. To protect against the spread of COVID-19, this meeting is being held via video conference, and we do have staff members and council members here in the chambers spread apart as advised by the County Health Department. So first item that we have for tonight is Grow Cedar Valley update, and I believe on Zoom we have our presenters tonight.
Absolutely. Good evening. This is Carrie Dara with Grow Cedar Valley, and glad to visit with you tonight, as we have several times a year over the last many years. I'm afraid our board chair was unable to join us, Brian Ernest, but he sends his regards and thanks, especially for the support and partnership that we've gotten year after year from the city of Cedar Falls. Really the meat of what we've been working on, other than what's been really evident getting to this crisis, is in your packet. But we have our Vice President of Economic Development here with us, Lisa Skubal. So I'll ask Lisa to take over and kind of walk you through some of the highlights and priorities of what we've been doing. So go ahead, Lisa, please.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council, and I see Shane is joining us as well. That's great, and others. We appreciate your collaboration with us around economic development, and especially right now as we are pivoting our work while staying true to our mission at Grow Cedar Valley. Since our last update, we saw the commitment of Netherlands-based tobacco giant North America commit to Cedar Falls. And they are presently leasing about 34,000 square feet in a portion of the former Hawkeye Box facility. The company manufactures small and mid-sized heavy equipment, including skid and wheel steer loaders in the Netherlands. And in Cedar Falls, they distribute their heavy equipment while building cells in the U.S. with their customers presently in agriculture, construction, landscaping, and of course municipalities. Among others, it was a great end of the year hearing the news from Rudolph DeYoung about the company's decision to locate in Cedar Falls, as it was 6 years ago when Rudolph announced plans to establish Cybert North America here. We started off the year ramping up with existing business visits, site selector culture to Chicago through our regional partners in February, a significant prospect visit in late February, which I believe most of you are familiar with or were involved in the process at some level. And then a trip in early March to Minnesota, visiting with 5 businesses just literally about a week before the shutdown occurred. Over the last couple months, we found external projects that were able to stand on their own, continue to be active with their site selection. Well, those projects that were based on speculation of continued market growth have gone away. Because of this, you're seeing 11 active opportunities right now. I'm happy to say the prospect who trust what we had visit in February is still very much active and moving forward, and we're waiting for the next steps on that. Since our last update, 3 are new opportunities, of which one materialized a few weeks ago. Since our report submission last week, we received an additional new lead, and we're currently preparing a submission for later this week with Shane Graham from staff. Moving forward, in April, we had to postpone a business trip to Illinois that we planned back in January, and that was actually scheduled for this month. We felt it prudent, not knowing what direction Illinois would head in reopening and where we were heading at the time. These trips take a long time to plan, so a trip that's planned for June, we have to start developing the list in April and start making calls by the end of that month. But we're going to reevaluate that in the fall, see where we are with COVID-19 and how we can accomplish making that call or that trip to Illinois. The Select USA trade show that Shane attended along with me last year and was planning to come along this year with me, we would be going there next week, but that was canceled also in early April. For 2020, given the international travel restrictions, because of the audience that we were wanting to meet were foreign direct investors and companies that weren't able to travel and didn't want to for the most part. The show will be back June of 2021, so we will plan for that moving forward. We may be seeing some external project leads ramping up at the end of the year, the first quarter of 2021, based on recent speculation from site consultants. With greater interest from companies that are looking to reshore manufacturing, regionalize more of the distribution centers, and establish additional food processing in the United States. And we've already seen some of that in the last 2 months. Our pivot work, as Carrie alluded to, since the shutdown included the emphasis with helping as many businesses as possible, including those in Cedar Falls. Being able to communicate effectively on changes on the SBA rules for existing businesses, encouraging businesses to apply for the Iowa Small Business Relief Program, which some businesses in Cedar Falls were very successful in getting money, by the way. In the program, while they aren't accepting any more applications, the state of Iowa is still going through evaluating all of the applications. And on a group call I was on 2 weeks ago with Debbie Durham, she promised that her team would be looking at every single application to give it a fair shake. But there's only so much money they can give away. And then lastly, creating in a matter of days, since the COVID shutdown, a resource page for existing business on Grow Cedar Valley's website. We continue to update information weekly on this page with all staff at GCVA contributing to content. We have individually reached out to existing businesses to get a sense of what resources they may need now. When we were doing that, we soon recognized that we need to reach more businesses than we're able to. If we did a survey of our existing businesses to get some good data and focus our work based on that need, that would be the right direction to head. So we did that. In your packet, you'll see the results of that survey done in late April, which includes representation of Cedar Falls businesses. And Shane was very active to reach out to those businesses and make sure that they also responded to that survey. With that information, Steve Furman has already shared this with our state and federal legislators to aid in their planning and possibly additional aid. Over 80% of the business revenue, when you look at that report, were affected by the shutdown, with most experiencing a degree of some level. And we expect that will continue and will vary by business sector. And this survey covered all business sector, whether they're a Main Street business, hospitality, or some of our primary industries, manufacturing, distribution. To that end, the state of Iowa just completed a statewide survey, a second round, the end of last week. And where they're going with their survey is they wanted to see where business confidence is at this point as the state of Iowa continues to dial up and open back the economy. As the opening begins, it's important that the state, since they just started their they will be starting a new fiscal year next month, to determine further state assistance and will that be needed, what it looks like, and who's going to need it the most. In our coming fiscal year, we will continue to pivot and prioritize. Next month, we will restart our individual existing business visits with a revised survey that will have COVID-19 questions either in person. We'll be able to do those in person or through Zoom, whatever's more important and safer for staff as well as the company. And we'll continue to follow up with individual needs while being able to compare pre- and post-COVID-19 impacts. So not only Grow Cedar Valley, but the city of Cedar Falls will be able to act appropriately of how long-term we can help our existing businesses as we enter the sustainability portion of what we're going through right now. Same for external lead generation and meetings. It's always preferred to have it face-to-face, but what makes sense, we'll be moving to Zoom meetings to engage and promote Cedar Falls and engage in conversations with prospects and leads. Grow Cedar Valley will be moving toward creating more virtual site tours of industrial sites for prospects. We'll move into the same thing with existing buildings and real estate as we move forward with this. What we realized quickly is that domestic and particularly international travel is difficult right now. And we want our sites and buildings to stand out from our competitors by offering a virtual alternative until a prospect can get here for a visit. We welcome the opportunity to have individual Zoom meetings should the mayor and council members choose to review in greater detail the work we're doing right now. We value your feedback. We want it. And we also want to look at the opportunities, anything we could do to further support you in your current role. So having said that, please reach out to either Carrie or me to schedule that. Carrie, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Thanks, and thanks, Lisa. Lisa said, the meat of everything that was covered is in your packet, but that usually brings on additional questions, so please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us with anything that is top of mind for you. We now have Will Frost here. He's our Director of Talent Development. And as you can imagine, while we knew that talent was the priority of all of our businesses, it was the biggest hurdle for all of our businesses. 2 months ago, that talent priority shifted dramatically. And so now, while talent is still a priority, we went from 2.75 unemployment to about 14 or 15% unemployment. So now talent is still a big priority for us, but now it is about replugging in people who may be out of a job back into the workforce. Maybe in the same career they came from, maybe something altogether different. Upskilling is going to be very important. So that continues to be a priority of ours. And Will is here to share some additional details. I'll let you take it away, Will. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Council, for allowing us to give this update once again, and being so accommodatable to our to this I guess the times with everything. So being able to do it virtually, as Carrie was mentioning, in 2019, April last year, we were seeing historic low unemployment rates. So we were at that 2.7, 2.8%. Today, fast forward, we're at that double digits. Those numbers, which means that everything kind of just changed. It was really a 180-degree shift. And so, looking at all of that, and we looked at how can we restructure ourselves. So one of the things that we've been working on is this post-COVID, this abstract really, and it's designed to not just help our investors, but to help the area businesses survive during this time, transform so that they can be successful and then perform later on. So really making lemonade out of the lemons we've been dealt. And this plan, it includes, like what Lisa brought up, reshoring, further in economic inclusion, as well as just overall shifting in a way that we as a community can just take this really unfortunate crisis and leverage it. Carrie mentioned a lot of people are unemployed now, so there's been a major shift in that. So where those people end up matters. And so we're looking at it as an opportunity to get these people plugged into places that might help them grow as an individual and help them grow the Cedar Valley as well. And so that's been a big shift in over the last couple of months with everything. And it also includes procuring best policies and procedures, and not just locally, but globally, how we can help our area businesses navigate the waters, whether it's employees working from home or a major shift in their the workforce. And so we look forward to continuing that. We still continue some of the things that we've been doing as well. So, and I'll quickly cover touch bases with some of this other stuff. Our economic inclusion conference is always a great event that we do each year. We're having it once again in Cedar Falls. We expect roughly about 300 participants. We still want to make sure that we get everyone engaged and involved and included into the economy as much as we can, and be more all-inclusive. Our committee has become a network too, so we are cross-pollinating ideals of what is working in different companies with other companies that might be struggling in certain areas or might be really doing well in one area, and that they can help provide insight to other people at the table. And we have our some collaborations that we're doing. So with Embark, everyone knows that our population has changed over the last several years. We've become a more diverse population. We have a lot of newcomer populations. And so as we're gearing up with this work with Embark, it's going to help us plug those individuals into the economy as well. We're a member of the One Cedar Valley, this coalition of organizations that we get to partner with. That's another big thing. That's reaching the most at-risk people in the community. and as well as participating with the Equity Initiative with Dr. Nafisa Mboye at the Black Hawk County Public Health. So we have all this kind of going on. And then we were kind of throwing this wrench into the midst of everything. But I've been tremendously pleased with the effort that's come from the city of Cedar Falls and how you've been at the table with all of this and helping us craft all of this as well. So I wanted to thank you all for that. I've also been very appreciative of the team that I work with, being able to pivot on a dime and be able to provide the resources that to the community that's needed at this time.
Thanks, Will. And one of the things I want to reiterate about Will's comments, we've been working with higher education, K-12. Everybody, as Will said, is not trying, but having to pivot. And so we've been very, very pleased with the conversations, especially with that upskilling and reskilling and plugging people back into the workforce and contributing to the economy. Other things that we've done differently, as you can imagine, our networking. That was one of the strengths of our community development organization, is to connect and have networking opportunities for businesses or people in like businesses to get together and those in different businesses to get together. Well, obviously we're not able to do that face to face, so we've really thrown out and launched several virtual opportunities through webinars we've hosted twice a week. We have several ongoing events and efforts that will be handled virtually. So it's been a new platform for us, but we're pretty excited about the potential of where this is going to go, because we're probably going to continue to do the virtual opportunities even longer. I would like to introduce, and I know you know him because he's at your meetings quite a bit, Jim Schaefer's here, our Director of Investor Relations. And I don't know, Jim, if we just have a couple minutes left unless there are questions, but if you want to add a couple of things, that'd be great.
Yeah, I just been able to talk with probably about 100 of our investors over the last couple of months. The spirits are good. Everybody's relatively positive. They're obviously anxious to get back to business. They know they need to be safe and all that stuff, but everybody's been good. So we're just taking it one day at a time. The conversations I have, I mean, we certainly appreciate you guys supporting us. As I go out and talk with the businesses, I share what Lisa and Will and the team are doing and ask for their continued support. And I think now more than ever, the business community needs to stick together, and the community in general, to get through this. And I feel pretty confident that we're going to come through this bigger and better than we were before. If we have that message on the Cedar Valley as a great place to do business. And like I said, I'm just anxious to get out there, and I look forward to continuing working with you all.
Great. Thank you, Jim and Will and Lisa. Now we do have a few minutes that we'd like to open up for questions if there's any out there from all of you. Again, if you think of things later, we're always available too, but if something came to mind while we were visiting, please ask away.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ms. Dara and your team. I have two questions. Do you have a sense for when your team will be back inside the TechWorks campus, or is that still up in the air for now?
No, good question. We have had a couple of our team members that have been continued to operate out of our office because they cannot operate remotely or at home. So it's been very part-time, but they go in when they have to get that work done. But we are working on a reentry plan. As you know, we have construction going on the top 3 floors of Tech 1, so it's actually been a good time for us to be out of the way. And not for the right reasons, but so we've been staying out of the way of the construction, but we're working with that project so that when we get back in, the access is easy and feasible. So this week we will have some folks operating out of the office. Next week for sure. We likely won't have the front door unlocked for a while, but that doesn't mean we can't be meeting with folks out in the common area or one at a time, but they would need to call for an appointment or a time to get together in our office. But to answer your question, we've already started that conversation and moving slowly back in. But again, we want to be safe and step by step, just like we're asking everybody else to do.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from council? It's difficult to see council members on the screen, so just chime in if you have one. And seeing none, okay. I appreciate your time for coming in or being online tonight.
Kind of coming in somewhere.
Right. And with that, that moves us over to the second item in our agenda, which is bills and payroll.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So a question for that is that a roll call or voice vote? Okay, so roll call, this requires a roll call vote.
Motion
So,
for
there must be a
approval.
motion to approve? It's been motioned and,
So moved.
okay, and this requires a roll call vote.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those are the items on our agenda tonight for Committee of the Whole. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved and
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Then we are adjourned. We will see you at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to our City Council meeting for Monday, June 1st, 2020. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Tiber.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And just as a reminder to the public, we are meeting partly in council chambers and partly on teleconference due to the desire to limit the spread of COVID-19. And this is in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Proclamation and the Iowa Public Information Board. So I will start us off tonight with approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting of May 18th?
Motion to approve.
Second.
moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? That carries. So that brings us to agenda revisions. Are there any agenda revisions tonight, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Special order of business tonight. Item 2 is a public hearing on amendments to the Citizen Participation Plan for the city's Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and Home Investment Partnership Program relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to receive proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that carries. And we now will ask if there's any written communications filed with the clerk.
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. That brings us to staff comments, and Director Sheets will be giving us a short spiel on this. So welcome, Director Sheets, and the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Just want to kind of briefly cover what's involved in a couple of these agenda items. This first one is related to our citizen participation plan, which we adopt and we adhere to the guidance about formal public input process and the timeline for that. And so with the CARES Act being passed in April of 2020, a portion of that allocated some funding to our Community Development Block Grant. And HUD is allowing a waiver to the normal 30-day public comment period to reduce that down to a minimum of 5 days. And so we have to first start by amending our citizen participation plan, which says 30 days. So we included a marked up version in the packet last time that when we were setting the public hearing, and then the final clean version is in your packet tonight. So that is the first step that we have to take in several of these CDBG items that are on the agenda tonight, and staff would recommend approval of these changes.
Thank you very much. I'll now open up the public hearing to public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would wish to speak to this item tonight? In order to do so, you can raise hand on your smartphone or computer or press *9 if connected by telephone. And I believe we have our Information Systems Director checking that for us.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So are any comments?
No comments.
All right, thank you. And also for council, maybe Councilor Member Miller, can you hear me okay now? It was kind of quiet earlier. It's better now?
Nope, it's working just fine now.
Okay, super. It was just a little bit quieter in our last meeting, so I'm trying to hold the mic closer. So with that, no public comments. That'll allow us to close the public hearing and bring us to item E, which is a resolution approving amendments to the Citizen Participation Plan for the Development Block Grant Program and Home Investment Partnership Program. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
Seconded. And this requires a roll call vote. Oh, excuse me, any discussion from council on this item? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Miller.
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 3 is a public hearing on amendments to the fiscal year 2019 to 2023 consolidated plan for Community Development Block Grant Program and Home Program funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve this notice of hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
If that passes. And I'll again ask Madam Clerk, are there any written communications on this item?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, also have Director Sheets speaking to us on this item as well. Director
Great.
Sheets?
Thank you. So as you noted, this is an update to the consolidated plan, which is a 5-year plan that we just adopted about a year ago. Again, in response to the CARES Act, with the additional funding coming through the Community Development Block Grant to support activities that prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus, Cedar Falls is receiving $160,662 toward what's being termed the CDBG CV grant process that we have available. So we are being asked to allocate the funding into various activities, but the first step that we need to do, since our annual action plan for the current year that we're in is tied to this 5-year consolidated plan, since we are in the first year of that 5-year plan, we have several minor updates to make to the consolidated plan to specifically consider the waiver in the notification as well as the funding amounts. And so we have in your packet suggested amendments to the administration and the strategic plan sections of that consolidated plan.
Okay, thank you, Director Sheets. I'll now open this up for public comment as well. Ms. Sorensen, is there anyone from public wishing to speak on this item?
I don't see any from the public, but Nick would like to comment.
Okay, and I will bring it back from public comment, which brings us into item E, and I'll close the public hearing. So under item E, this is a resolution approving amendments to the Consolidated Plan for Community Development Block Grant and Home Program Funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'll open that up for council discussion. Councilmember Tiber, did you have a comment on this item?
Yeah, actually a question to staff, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly.
In the memo, it describes a requirement for the projects to be linked to COVID-19 in some way. And so my question is twofold. First of all, does that apply to our original funding plans? And secondly, what defines or what constitutes a COVID link for the additional funding that's being administered here?
So for the first question about whether it's tied to our existing annual action plan in terms of our existing entitlement funds that we receive every year, the answer would be no to that. On the second question about what defines activity that prevents, prepare for, or responds to, HUD has left that really up to us to determine. They've given a little bit of guidance in terms of what we've seen in other communities, maybe needing to respond to availability of ventilators or hospital beds or those types of things where maybe you're having to convert a facility that wasn't really intended for that. So those are the types of things that they've given some guidance on. But in the next agenda item, we'll talk about specifically what programs and activities we'd recommend amending our annual action plan to. This agenda item's related to that 5-year consolidated plan, which is a little bit more of an overview, but nonetheless, we had some tweaks we had to make so that we don't have to circle back to that later when HUD points something out.
Okay, thank you, Director Sheets. Any other questions or comments from council?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So Stephanie, if we actually look at that, what's called the goals, is that where I see where the 3 main numbers are, or is that what you're referring to we would see in the next item, in item number 4?
I think
like
so.
like $100,000 difference in the maintaining existing affordable houses, and then it looks like there's about $32,000 in preventing homelessness and other offer family and children services, and then about $28,000 in providing effective planning and administration.
Right, that's the next agenda item.
But
that
it
we'll
is
go over
under,
that.
it's covered under this item in item 3 called goals.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 4 is a public hearing on amendments to the FY19 Annual Action Plan for Community Development Block Grant and Home Program Funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That passes. And that turns us over for written communications from City Clerk. Are there any, ma'am?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And back to Director Sheets for some staff comments.
Great, thank you. So now we're on the agenda item about our current federal year that we're in, fiscal year 19, the annual action plan that we've adopted. And as Councilmember DeBurr was pointing out with the last agenda item, there is a fairly detailed table about the estimated costs going to each of the different programs. And so this is where then in this annual action plan, we make the updates of where we would allocate that funding, what we're proposing. We've talked with the Housing Commission about this as well, so we felt that that was a good step to take, as we usually do with any of our CDBG funding. We go through that step as well. So we're proposing an amendment to our currently active plan, which is also recommended by HUD as the quickest way to make that funding available. And so the proposal is, we think that the biggest impact that we could make in Cedar Falls is trying to make more funding available for what we've had a big program in is that owner-occupied rehabilitation and repair. So these are projects that can range from $5,000 to $20,000, depending on what the project is. Might be immediate need, such as a new roof that's needed, or air conditioning or heating unit, those types of things. Those are outdoor improvements that are easy to say that if you lost your job due to COVID-19, you don't have the funds to do those types of projects, yet they are needed in order to provide shelter to your family. So those are the types of things that we envision with that owner-occupied rehabilitation, and we're putting a majority of that CARES Act funding. We're recommending that it be in that category because we've seen a big impact with that before. But then our service agencies, as we've termed them, do a lot of important work, and we wanted to provide a little bit more funding to them, and so we would recommend allocating about $32,000 towards service agencies. We would be permitted to do more. However, there is also a caution by HUD that we avoid a duplication of services. So if they've received funding in another way, or families that they're supporting received it in another way, that would be a duplication to receive it both that way as well as through this. So we were cautioned that perhaps that may not be something to sink all of your money into, but support that a little bit more than what the typical cap is in a normal year. And then, of course, with any added programming, there's added administrative expense in order to carry that out. And so we're recommending about 18% of it, which is less than what we would be capped at. $28,000 be to support the duties that staff have to do, as well as Intercog, who we contract with.
Okay, thanks again, Director Sheets. I'll open this up again for public comment. Does anyone from the public wish to speak? You can press raise hand on your icon in Zoom, or else *9 on your phone. Is there anything, Ms. Sorensen, from the public?
Nothing from the public.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll now close that public hearing and move us to item 4E, thank you, which is a resolution approving amendments to the FY19 Annual Action Plan for Community Development Block Grants and Home Programs relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded, and open for council discussion. Seeing none, this will require a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Final item and special business is number 5, a public hearing on the proposed vacation of certain public right-of-way along Prairie Parkway. Is there a motion to approve the notice of hearing?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. That passes, and I'll ask for any written communications with the city clerk.
I have received no written communications, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments, I believe we have Karen Howard tonight. So, Ms. Howard, it's your floor.
Yes, I'm on video here. Yes, this is a request for vacating the Prairie Parkway right-of-way. And I just want to make a distinction here. When the city receives a right-of-way vacation request, there's really two steps. This request was received from Western Home Communities. It's for about 22,000 square feet of public right-of-way that's located at the southwest corner of Prairie Parkway and Prairie View Road, the roundabout there. So the first step in the vacation is the question of whether we need that right-of-way, that public right-of-way for roadway purposes, for public use, for access to private property, and for utilities. And those are the questions that the Planning and Zoning Commission considered. This is an extra piece of right-of-way. It's located at the curve, as Prairie Parkway curves after the roundabout. So it's not needed for roadway purposes. It's extra piece of land in that location. However, we do have some utilities along the roadway there, so staff is recommending to retain several easements. A 30-foot wide landscape drainage and utility easement established along that portion of the vacated plat, and a 10-foot utility easement established in the northern portion of the vacated area along Prairie View Road. The second step of this would then be, after this is vacated, if the council votes to vacate this right-of-way, then it's made available for sale. And that process then has another public hearing process that will be involved in about 60 days. We have to offer it by state law. It takes about 60 days to receive offers for that right-of-way. We have to give preference to the adjacent property owners and also to the property owners that originally dedicated the right-of-way to the city. So those letters have gone out, but that will be a future process. The process tonight is the question about vacating the right-of-way. Staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission have recommended approval, retaining those easements that I spoke about.
Thank you very much, Ms. Howard. I'll now open this up for public comment. So again, you can press raise hand icon or *9 on your phone. And Ms. Sorensen, are we seeing anything now?
Yes, we do. I will open it up for the caller 0467.
And name and address for the record, please.
Yes, this is Jim Skane, and I messed things up because I had the wrong number. But I'm interested in this because is there any monetary exchange? In other words, because you are giving up the right of way, which obviously is worth something for the property owner, is there any value that is exchanged in this process?
All right, thank you, Mr. Skane. Ms. Howard, I think you can have an answer for that one.
Yes, I can answer that question. Right now, the question is just whether we would vacate that portion of right-of-way. As I explained earlier, once that's vacated, then we can make it available for sale. It does have to be sold at fair market value. That value will then be determined and discussed at a future public hearing.
Thank you. So there will be a sale, and there may be a monetary change for that. Expected that there would be for the value of that property. So any other questions?
But there's no.
Any other questions or comments from public?
But you are not, Mr. Mayor. You're not having a pre-appraisal of the value of that property.
Ms. Howard has already answered the question. So I'll ask for any other speakers for public comment.
No other speakers?
Yes, go ahead.
There's no other speakers from the public.
Thank you. So that is the public side of that item 5. And so I'll close the public hearing and bring us back to passing an ordinance vacating certain public right-of-way along Prairie Parkway upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So
Move approval.
It's been motioned and seconded. I'll open for council discussion.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilor DeBoer, go ahead.
Does the 30-foot and the 10-foot easement give us adequate room if we needed to do any kind of road repair? Yes, it does. Okay, thank you.
I had a little bit trouble hearing Susan.
Oh, go
I'll
ahead.
talk louder next time.
So, any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, this
Can
most,
that question be answered, Mayor?
The answer was that it provides adequate space.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear Ms. Howard.
okay. Thank you. And just for everyone's benefit, I do thank you for your patience with us on this. The last few meetings we've done have been all Zoom, so we've all been working remotely. We're doing this hybrid for the first time, so it's a little bit trickier. So I appreciate your indulgence with these questions and technical issues we're working through. So it's been motioned and seconded. If no other questions or comments from
Mayor?
council. Yes, go ahead.
Councilman Tiber has his hand raised.
Could you repeat that, please?
Councilman Tiber has his hand raised.
Oh, yes. Okay. Councilmember Tiber, please just go right ahead and chime out when you have something to say because I can't see you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. One other question, and this is more out of curiosity than anything else, but is the city currently responsible for maintaining that right of way as it is today?
Yes, the city is responsible for maintaining the right-of-way.
Okay, so this in effect would move all that property to the adjacent owner or the highest bidder?
Yes, 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 if conveyed in the future.
Thank you. And is that to the curb, Mrs. Howard?
It's not to the curb, we're retaining the sidewalk.
Sidewalk. Got it.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Harding, go ahead.
I have one question. Just again, mine's out of curiosity as well. When we move to the second part of this process, Ms. Howard said that we would sell for fair market value. What's the process on determining fair market value?
So there was an appraisal of the property, and then the value of that was determined, the easement value. We would reduce the value of that portion of it because we would be retaining the easements in those areas.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then this requires a roll call vote.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us into old business, which is item 6, passing ordinance 2966, amending section 26-121 of the Code and Ordinances by rezoning from A1 agriculture to R1 residential and M1 planned light residential of recently annexed property located south of West Viking Road and east of South Union Road upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Some second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Open for council questions. And the public? Ms. Sorensen, do we have any from the public?
Nothing from the public, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Brings us into new business, which is our consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a voice vote in a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does anyone from the council wish to pull an item? And does anyone from the public wish to pull an item? Seeing
I'm
none?
not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
No comments from
No
the public.
comments. Okay, thank you. I'll just make one note for item 8 before we do the consent calendar. Receive and file monthly department reports. I did put a note in the comments section of the cover letter about the extra work that was put on by the Info Systems Division, and I just wanted to give them a congratulations for that month of March and the difficulty that was required in getting so many staff members up on remote working and VPN and trained. So thank you very much to Julie Sorensen and her team on that. And with that, we're in the consent calendar, and is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oops, sorry about that. Opposed? That passes and moves us over to the resolution calendar. So the resolution calendar, the following items will be acted upon by a roll call vote with a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Yes, go ahead. Number 13, please. So we'll pull 13. Any others from council? Hearing none. I'll ask from the public.
Nothing from the public.
Okay, thank you. So I'll read off, oh, excuse me, I didn't read off the other resolution calendar, or the consent calendar, but it was approved. So I'll be more careful about that in the future. So resolution calendar, item 12 is a resolution approving electronic bidding procedures and the official statement relative to the sale of $3.4 million in general obligation loan notes. Item 14 is a resolution approving and adopting the city's FY21 fee schedule. Item 15 is a resolution levying final assessment for costs incurred by the city to remove snow and ice from sidewalks abutting property located at 2307 West 3rd Street. 16 is the same assessment for 1934 Main Street. Item 17 is the same assessment for 1009 State Street. And then item 18 is a resolution approving renovation of the monument sign located adjacent to the Hearst Center for the Arts, as recommended by the Arts and Culture Board. 19 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an amended agreement with Gillian Christie relative to the placement of a sculpture at 220 Clay Street. Item 20 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a land maintenance agreement with Thomas Greiner relative to maintaining recently annexed undeveloped land. 21 is a resolution approving an amendment to the preliminary plat for the Arbors. Item 22 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a First Amendment to a professional service agreement with Intercog for grant administration relative to the CARES Act. Item 23 is a resolution receiving the bids and approving the low bid of Boulder Contracting in the amount of $69,000 for the 2020 CDBG sidewalk infill project. Item 24 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a stormwater maintenance and repair agreement with J. Davis Properties relative to a stormwater management plan. Item 25 is resolution approving and accepting a quit claim deed in conjunction with the 1994 transfer of jurisdiction of Center Street, also Highway 218 from First Street north to the city limits. And I'll just make a note on that as well, that this was primarily on 25 an administrative change, but we already were doing the maintenance and the acting as owners of that land. It just officially transferred it from the state to the city. So is there a motion to approve those items minus item 13?
So moved.
So moved.
So motion and seconded, and requires a roll call? Yeah, requires a roll call vote, please.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harning,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
Sires, Tiber.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us back to item 13, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement with Perkins and Will relative developing a resilience plan for the city of Cedar Falls. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded.
Second.
Thank you. Open it for council discussion. Councilor Sires, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do have a couple comments. It looks like we budgeted $87,000 for a study.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. Can you step a little closer to the microphone?
Sure. As a point of order, he requests a closer
sorry.
mic.
Is that better?
Better.
A little better, yeah.
Okay. We're going to pay out $87,000 for a study. I'd like to see our citizens more involved with something like this as opposed to paying out $87,000. It looks to me like studies are going to come up one way, that they've kind of already figured out the direction they want to go. I'd like to see more citizens' input. I did get an email on this that was opposed to having a study and thought maybe we could have more of a citizens committee that would look into some of these kinds of things. And that's it. I'm just kind of opposed to an outside party coming in to study what we should have.
Okay, that's okay. Thanks, Councilmember Sires. Any other questions or comments from council? Yes, Councilmember DeBoer.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember DeBoer first.
At the last meeting, we talked about some projects being pushed back on the schedule due to the COVID-19, and I was wondering if perhaps this would be a good one to also have been delayed and not done at this time because it's more of a want than a need.
Certainly. So that could be a question.
Mayor,
Staff?
volume is off.
So the question, did you hear Councilmember DeBoer? Councilmember Cruz?
I did not.
No.
Okay, so just
very little of Mr. Sires either, to be honest.
okay, we'll be more careful in the future. So just keep that mic up real close. What Councilmember DeBoer had asked about was if this is one of those kinds of items that, as we had discussed in past meetings, potentially pulling items, delaying them due to some of the budget issues with COVID-19. Is this one of those items that would apply? Did I capture that correctly?
Correct.
So I will open it up. Director Rodenbeck, would you like to discuss this one?
No volume again, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
None at all.
Oh, so we're not getting anything from that microphone. Oh, try now with the mic
Turn it
on.
on, right? No, it wasn't on the list to delay funding when we did that presentation because the funding source in the CIP is general fund revenue. So it was already in the 21 budget. So that's why, we were looking at things that we were kind of looking down the road. So this one actually already is in the FY21 budget.
So as a kind of a follow-up question, is it prudent or possible for us to remove items from the 21 budget?
Yes, I mean, the council can do that. I was just explaining why we didn't, do that at the, because we had talked about with bond sales or anything in the actual budget, if it was already budgeted for, we didn't have it on the list. Yep. But yes, if the council would choose to delay it, the council could do that.
Okay, Councilman DeBoer.
Well, as a follow-up to that, since the cost is higher than budgeted, I just feel it inappropriate to be handled at this time.
And is the cost higher than budget? I thought it was right under.
Well, it's right above. We had budgeted 80,000 and the bid is 87.5.
Okay.
Just short of 10% higher then.
Yeah.
Okay, and Councilmember Cruz, was that you who had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As I look through the scope of the project and some of the descriptions of the process, there's a few comments in here regarding the discovery findings will be based on existing studies. We see across the United States and the world, for that matter, with the COVID-19, a dramatic change in human behavior, driving habits, and in some countries, and even the U.S., we see air pollution dramatically declining and changing. So if anything, we can have further discussion with the other council members, but I think tabling this would be appropriate until we have a better understanding what's going to be the new normal for the country. Everything from driving and working from home and that sort of thing. Very much like we tabled the College of Visioning, I think this would be a good candidate in light of a couple things with, like I just described, along with the budget. And as I dig further, there's a section in here about carbon planning based on the latest climate science. Again, the climate science that's the latest and greatest would be changing daily. So I think it would be very appropriate to postpone or table this, and if we're ready to make a motion to do so, I'd like to do so.
Okay, well, on the floor right now is a motion to approve, so we certainly can still discuss options, and then if a council member believes it's appropriate to motion to table, we can take that as well before that final vote. Councilmember Harding?
I wanted to know, since this had popped up before my tenure on council, and I know it was inspired by some UNI and other committees, with the scope of this, what are we hoping to achieve as a broad term? You know, what are we trying to achieve in the long run, I guess?
Sure. So, and I just think for everybody's benefit, maybe I'll go back to kind of what you're referring to, Councilman Harding. So, you know, last May or June, Eric Giddens with CEEE came and gave a presentation. I think council was interested in moving forward, knowing that Dubuque and Iowa City and some other people had done some plans. You know, and then so we formed a working committee, really just to kind of get at what you're talking about is, what do we want to do with this working committee? Is it just take some things we've already worked on that Cedar Falls Utilities has done, or Solid Waste Commission, or Public Buildings? Or do we want something bigger than that? And bigger than that meaning actually developing a plan and get community involvement. You'll see in here in the proposal, part of their fee is actually doing community involvement, is getting it, you know, finding out what the community wants to see as it relates to whatever you want to call it, sustainability, resilience, whatever you want to call it. What do they want to see? And I think for the committee, we realize that if we really want to develop a plan, don't we want to get that community involvement and have that expertise in looking at water resources, carbon emissions, doing all of that. So I think what it's really about is achieving what are some things that we can do, not just as the city of Cedar Falls, but as the community as a whole in terms of environmental impacts. How can we deal with that? How can we reduce that? And so that's why then we came back to council in November with recommendations about what the committee wanted to propose. And then at that time, the council gave us a direction to proceed ahead with hiring a consultant and doing that whole process. So that kind of got us to where we are today.
Okay, thank you, Director Rodenbeck. Other discussions about or questions about the plan itself?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus,
Mayor?
go ahead. Councilmember Cyrus first, please.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The thing that I've started to see on these studies is it opens up an opportunity for a tremendous amount of more spending for the city. Let's start to look within ourselves to do these studies and what we can do. And I'm opposed to spending $87,000 to an outside entity to look into how much more we can spend, especially at a time like this. I think we should strike this down right now.
Okay, so there was another comment from within Zoom. Was there a council member who wanted to speak on this item?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a statement and then a question as well. And I think to a couple of points that were referenced, a big portion of this is setting the framework for the city so we have something to base the future off of. So to the point about tabling it, I understand that to a certain degree that there are some things that are changing. I think in a lot of our residents' minds, we're already behind the gun on this. So I'm not in favor of tabling it. And I think the intricacy and how many different pieces of our community are involved in this study, I completely understand the desire to hire a consultant to do it, because when you look at the reports from Iowa City or from Dubuque or wherever else, there is a ton of details in there, and I like the idea of a professional coming and doing that. My question is for Director Rodenbeck. There's some concern. I think it was based off of how the memo was worded, but regarding whether or not the consultant was a part of this before they were selected, can you offer some background as to how the process went for this?
Sure. So again, based on that direction in back in June, from the council, we formed a committee, which was 4 staff members, a community member, and Eric Giddens with the CEEE. And part of that committee, so no consultant was part of the committee. But when we did the process, so we did an RFP. We did get 4 people that submitted proposals. We narrowed it down to the top 2 that our committee scored and felt were the 2 best firms. And then we did interviews with them. And during the interview that happened to be with Perkins and Will, they talked about, that we use terms like sustainability or resilience, and they kind of felt like what we were talking about and talking to our committee, that resilience was probably a better term for it. So my point I was trying to make is, this name has kind of changed along the way. It started as climate action, and then it became sustainability, and now it's resilience. And I didn't want anybody to think this was an addition, that this is the same. When the name changed, I thought it could get confusing. So by no means was the consultant part of the committee, part of the recommendation. It was just in doing that interview, that was just one of the suggestions they had.
Okay, thank you, Director Edenbeck. Are there, for council, are there any other questions before we move to public comment?
I have a couple.
Yes, Councilor Hart.
I would like to know, since this study is going to have participation from the public highly, do we anticipate the COVID situation playing a part in affecting this? Is this something, especially if it's going to happen in the fall? That would be the first part of the question. The second,
Do you mean in terms of like limiting participation?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. As in terms of limiting participation, I would hate to see COVID get in the way of that. So that would be the first part. And the second part is there a way we're looking at this, angling it so that with the results of this study, we intend to use the sustainability to not only help the environment, but possibly save money, to where we could say, oh, this was money that was well spent, not just for the environment, but also fiscally as well? Sorry, Jen.
Yep.
Up and down.
That's just fine. In terms of your second question and financial, I think whenever you do a plan, your hope is at some point it is going to provide things that are going to save money long term. Now, we also understand that for a lot of these things, it sometimes takes some years to see the benefit. It's not, we spend it today and we see the benefit tomorrow. It does take some years to do that. So, I think that's one thing. And so does that answer your question about the financial part? Yeah.
It does.
Okay.
Was there any ideas thrown out with the committee as to possible ways to not, that in the long term we could save? Or is it just something that we hope to see? I'm just curious if there were any ideas, I guess, from the committee thrown out.
Well, one of the things that people may recall back in November too, and this isn't the main thing, but one of the things was when we did the presentation in November, we did talk about, as part of this committee, we were also going to, Cedar Falls Utilities is going to be doing an energy study of every city of Cedar Falls owned buildings. So, whether it's our HERS Center, our rec center, they're going to be doing that as part of this, doing an energy study. So that's just a small example that was formed in this committee and that we actually had as one of our recommendations in November. And then back to your question about public participation is actually when we did the interviews, it happened to be right in the middle of all this. And so that, of course, was one of the questions we asked the consultants was, how does that change our public participation? And quite frankly, the committee was concerned that with the COVID, will there be less participation? And of course, we didn't want that. We're trying to get as much as we can for people to participate. So they talked about what are some different strategies they can use. And of course, through all of this, we also don't know how things are going to change over the next few months. So whether there's going to be some kind of combination of some things, I guess that's what we're still trying to figure out, but it was something we posed to both of the firms when we did interviews was, how might you see doing something different? Is it more online survey type things? And interesting that what we heard actually from both firms is sometimes you can get more participation by doing some things online. So, but I don't disagree. Obviously, COVID does change things as it relates to public participation, and I think we'll have to kind of get that all figured out if we proceed ahead.
One last question.
I'll
go
to Councilor DeBeer.
Well, while Jennifer's up there, if CFU is doing their own study, is this kind of a duplication, or are we better off to wait, let CFU finish theirs before we move ahead?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind the study of the buildings is just a small piece. You know, we want to talk about what are some things we can do community-wide, and that's why we had things like Solid Waste Commission come in. We know solid waste is a big contributor when we're talking about sustainability. I mean, solid waste is really probably the biggest one that we need to talk with and talk through all this. So it's really just one piece of that whole thing. But I think, again, we've talked, and maybe Ron, I don't know if you were wanting to add to Simon's questions or no? Okay.
So, thanks, Mayor. One of the things that we did as a working committee is we took a number of the plans that were given to us, and we actually reviewed those and said, hey, what do we like out of these plans? What are the things that we actually want to see as far as where we're going in the future? Councilman Cedar made a point of saying, hey, this looks like it's something that will actually cost the city more of coming up with projects. Actually, we look at it a little differently. We look at it as this will be a guiding instrument that we can use. So when we do have projects come up, there'll be some guidance in there as, hey, these are the things you should really look at to try to help save the community money during those projects. So.
Okay, thank you. And I'll open it for council members from at home. Since I can't see you, does anyone have a comment or I can see you now. Anything
Mr.
to
Mayor,
add?
excuse me, it's Kevin Rogers.
Yes, Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Councilmember Cruz, I thought I heard him move to table this item, and before we go any further, I think his motion needs to be addressed.
Okay, certainly. So,
I could comment on that.
yes, go ahead.
Well, and do we need without condition is not debatable, but I haven't heard a second yet either.
Yeah, and my understanding was he was just saying he'd be interested in a motion. He didn't actually bring that motion forward yet. So I was listening for that.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would like to
apologies.
I'd like to have an opportunity for public comment before we move that, because there may be some questions from the public or some comments. So I'll again go to the council on Zoom. Does anyone wish to add to the discussion there? Councilor Miller or Dara? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Tiber. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say, this is definitely admirable. I think we're going the right path. However, when looking at the scope of services and methodology, it's one page. It's on page 41 of the proposal. It really focuses on one key indicator, and that's carbon planning. And I get that. That really touches the environmental leg of sustainability or resiliency. But there's also many social and economic considerations. It's generally considered a three-legged stool. And those play second order to the carbon planning. So this is to imply that if all we do is minimize our carbon, everything from a social and economic standpoint is good. And I just read through, and I'm a little bit concerned about the actual methodology. So, and I'll just offer one example. Today, and all these things are touched, including reducing city operating costs, because in theory, if you reduce your energy, you're reducing your energy consumption, your environmental impact, and that has economic benefits as well for everybody. But we have over 300 acres of buyout properties that we continue to mow today. Almost 12 years after the major flood incident. And, many of these are qualified to move to more of a resilient prairie or something of that nature. And we still haven't done that. There are some common sense things that we can do, but, that touches economics. It improves the social and the fabric. It provides additional habitat, and it also achieves our environmental gains. And so, I'd like us to kind of generate some of these thoughts internally with focus on all these three legs, because my fear with this current proposal is we're only looking at carbon reduction. And we all know that sustainability is more than that. It's social and economic as well. So, my concern is just with the proposal itself. I support the endeavor, but the proposal is a little bit off the mark for what we want to accomplish from a sustainability and resiliency standpoint. That is all.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Tiber. Anyone else on Zoom from council
Yeah.
Then, yes, Councilmember Dare, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilman Tiger's take on this. I also understand where Councilman Miller is coming from, and I'm come from both of those places. What I don't want to lose, I understand that it seems like a big expense, but we're at a point where we finally recognize that Cedar Falls is one of few communities in the state that already is moving forward environmentally. I mean, we're really doing some fine things here, but they're not necessarily purposeful. They're not organized. It's not what drives us necessarily. So what I liked about this proposal was it put a spotlight on doing that, making that a priority. And if by tabling this or not approving this keeps sustainability and planning for sustainability as a priority, and we have an active working group of residents and city, people invested in this, I could live with not. What I liked about the proposal was it put this issue on the front burner, and I think it's something we can't lose sight of, COVID or no COVID. The long-term health of our environment should be our priority. So whether we support this, I mean, I can vote for it, but if I don't support it, I want to know that we're going to get very active with a group of active leaders in this community to really put an emphasis behind sustainable practices and do it in a meaningful way. And I think we've got a lot of experts in this community. So I'm prepared to support it, but if I get some assurance that we're ready to organize a group and really take advantage of our local expertise to build on what we're already doing and ensure that our future planning is built around this, then I can go either way. But I don't. So perhaps the tabling is might give us some time to discuss what's this going to look like. Are we committed to a contract with these people? I mean, do we have to approve this tonight, or can we regroup and in 2 months have this, have a better idea what we're, do we know about that? Do we have to do this tonight?
Yeah, so that would be a question to staff of if there's a time urgency for or requirement for approving this tonight.
When we started this process, we kind of went backwards. And what I mean by that is if there was going to be anything that came out of the plan, we wanted to know about that before we did the next budget cycle. So we kind of started with when we want to receive a plan and worked backwards on a timeline. And so, I think really for us, it was about, that's why when we're kind of crunched anyway, because we kind of put it on hold a little bit during the COVID when we had planned on doing some things, but we had talked to the consultant, do they think they can still make that timeline if we can get a contract approved? So, I think for us to make that, we would need to do it. But in saying all that, I also just want to say that I think if the council's really not interested, I don't know that delaying it 2 months, I'm not sure what people want to hear for 2 months. I mean, I kind of feel like we either want to do it or we don't want to do it. Does that make sense? And so now if there is truly follow-up questions and you want a table to get more questions, obviously staff's happy to do that. But that's really the only urgency I would just say is because we had hoped to kind of make that timeline to get a report in November, December.
Okay. Thank you. I believe at this point I've heard from all the council members on this, so I would like to open it up to the public first and then come back to council for comments. So Ms. Sorensen, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Yes, I'm going to start with Kelly Dunn. I'll unmute her.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Dunn. And just name or address for the record, please.
915 Royal Drive, Cedar Falls. I appreciate the discussion, and I just want to say that I like Councilman Tiger's point of view. I agree with that. There's lots of common sense things that can be done. I just want to make sure that we don't lose focus and the momentum. Because I remember the first, when Mr. Giddens spoke and I remember the community support behind it. And I remember, for me, climate change is real, and it's going to need to be addressed from the communities. I don't see it being addressed nationally. So I appreciate that Cedar Falls had the discussion and the vision and hopefully the backing to move forward and make sure that we are saving our planet. Because if we don't save our planet, there's really not much left. So I appreciate your discussion. I hope we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
That's it.
Next speaker for public comment.
Yes, I'm going to move to Leanne Paul.
All right, thank you. Welcome tonight. And name and address for the record, please.
You may have to unmute. Okay.
Leanne Saul, 1825 Green Hill Road.
You, Ms. Saul.
I noticed that there is an item of reimbursable expenses, and I wondered if there was a limit on that, or I see what's included, mileage, et cetera, but is there a limit on the amount of reimbursable expenses for the studies and all of the traveling, et cetera?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Saul. So within that contract, it lists items that will be paid for, and if there are reimbursable expenses, the question was, as I understand the question is there an upper limit on what those reimbursables could be, or is it a blank check? Ms. Rodbeck.
Not an upper limit, but what we do with all of those type of things when reimbursables is they have to get approved before they do them. So I think for staff, we would obviously try to very much limit what those are. But we also understand, again, with COVID changing things, I'm not sure if there will be as much of that as there would have been if they were going to come for multiple meetings, do public participation. But not necessarily a limit, but again, we would pre-approve them before they happened.
Okay, thank you. I'll finish up with public comment and then come.
Well, it was just a follow-up on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, so they can basically get the 87 plus? Is that what you're saying?
That's actually pretty standard. I think everyone that we had that submitted a proposal had that in there about reimbursement, because I think they don't know sometimes what travel costs are going to be, when they come here, where that might happen. So.
And was that the same for the visioning project when we did that contract, that they probably had a expensibles?
Yes, what we often try to do, though, in those is have them at least estimate what they might be, so we kind of know that, so it's not a unknown quantity. But yes, it will depend.
Okay. Thank you. Next speaker for public comment.
No more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring that back to council for final comments.
Can we work with Perkins and Will to adjust the scope of the study to include more things that we are concerned about?
Thank you, Mr.
Can I have an add-on question to that too, Mr. Mayor?
Let's answer the first one from Mr. Gaines, and then Councilor Tiber will answer your question as well.
So yes, I think we can work with them to look at the scope, but I also know that from some of the other plans that we've looked at, their scope is going to kind of mirror some of those. The carbon footprint part of it is one part of it. It is a large part of it, but that's just one facet of the whole plan. So.
Okay. All right, and then Councilmember Tiber, did you have a follow-up question for that?
Yeah, so when I looked at the deliverables, the one thing that I wish we would have received from the firm was a focus on, it's not just a vision, and there's a toolkit, but it's not specific on any item. But if you're going to make an investment in a project, you look at return on investment, because there'll be capital costs. There could be operational changes. And with any decision that we make in our city, we started to do it with University Avenue, we look at things like cost reductions. We don't just look at the capital expense, but we look at cost reductions. That's safety improvement. That's time improvement. It's reducing consumables. We look at social improvement. That would be neighborhood connectivity, livability, habitat measures, and then also the environmental impact. And I can see why, but I think sustainability and resiliency is much, much more than just measuring carbon and developing a long-term carbon vision. We want to reduce carbon production. It's a matter that's just good business because it means that you're reducing waste and you're doing more with fewer resources. And to me, it just didn't read right in the proposal. I want to have something that's a little bit more actionable in the actual plan, not just another vision or a guide, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps I misread the study or the proposal, but that's my read.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
So,
Gaines.
Mr. Tiber referenced the University Avenue project there. If you recall, we actually hired a consultant to actually study, give us those carbon emissions, the gas savings, the time savings, all of those things came out of the study. So that's exactly what we'd be looking at here but this would be more of a sweeping projects across the city. So,
okay. So to understand right, then the proposal didn't, for University Avenue, didn't include that information. That didn't come out until after the study.
So originally, you're absolutely right. So one of the guiding forces that they heard from the public is, hey, what drives some of these decisions? And so you come out with cost savings, you come out with manpower, you come out with connectability, all of the things that Mr. Tiber had said. So,
okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, discussion from council? Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead. Councilmember Cruz, is that you? Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask or get some guidance here. I mentioned tabling this, but if postponing would be a better process, because concerned that reading the scope of services here provided that there's a reliance on prior studies in a fairly big way that may not be valid after or during the world's evolution of the current COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, and it's going to change the baseline that the firm is using to give us guidance going forward. So I see many changes in the equity world, in the stock market world that I deal in, of firms, airlines, and all sorts of other companies that are changing to new normals of business process. And, unless there's other discussion, I could make a motion to postpone potentially this in some fashion. If we figure a 3-month, 2-month, I don't know that we necessarily have to hit the December presentation because COVID could flare back up again. I may not think it will. I do not think it will. But who knows? It started in mid-March in the United States to affect us in the way we do business, and that's not many months ago. So I guess I would like to make a motion to postpone the start of the project here.
Well, and Mr. Rogers can back me up or help me out on this. Understanding Robert's rules, you can do a tabling, but there's no provision really for postponing, correct?
There actually is in the council rules a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Okay. So is that separate from a tabling then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do you happen to remember what number that one is in the rules?
Sure. It's Rule 43, and follow-up is Rule 48 of Admin Policy Number 7.
Okay.
Excuse me, Kevin, is that indefinitely? Is there some definition of that? I don't have a problem postponing it because it seems to me there's plenty to talk about. But what I don't want to do is to drop the ball and just not have it ever. I want a postponement to mean we're going to start a work group, get some other people involved, meet that committee. I think we had a good committee, but I like to sit in on those things, I like to even have some input, and we really didn't have that opportunity. I'd just like to see us take this plan and maybe tweak it so it better fits some of this discussion tonight. I don't want to rush into it and spend a lot of money on something that isn't meeting our needs, but I also don't want to drop the ball. That's my biggest concern. If we delay it or table it or vote it down, it's not going to come up again. And it's too important to let go. So if it's a delay and it means we're going to put together a work group to fine tune it or better meet some of the issues you're talking about, I'm good with that.
Okay, and Mr. Rogers, is that procedurally acceptable?
Is that what you're thinking, Daryl?
Well,
let me go into that
clarity.
first, Councilmember Cruz. I just wanted to clarify from Attorney Rogers that was the intent of the postpone indefinitely, if that is procedurally okay to do.
Yes, and so how we, and remember the matter pending is approval of this contract, and so in order to get that back before council again, we'd follow our regular procedure for getting that agenda item back on council, which would be within the discretion of mayor and council. So it doesn't mean it's gone forever. It means it's postponed for consideration.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Cruz, go ahead.
Could I then, Mr. Rogers, clarify if we vote to table or vote to postpone, are they both indefinite or are they almost one and the same?
They're similar, but for right now, actually procedurally, we have a motion to postpone indefinitely, and I haven't heard a second yet.
And has that motion? Yes, go ahead.
Well, I believe that has to be addressed, doesn't it? That there's the motion was made, yeah.
Okay, and was there an actual motion made, or was there just a
second.
question about it? Of whether we should postpone? Because I'll go ahead and do if Mr. Cruz, Councilor Cruz wants to go ahead and make that motion officially to postpone.
Well, my question, if I should procedurally retract my motion and then ask if the differences to allow us to bring it forward are better by tabling, to answer to Frank's comments and Nick's comments and others where we get some more community involvement and clarity and decide what is the new normal. So that's what I'd like to see. So if I should phrase it as a tabling, how do we bring back a tabled project like this?
Okay, so I'm understanding for Mr. Rogers' sake, I'm understanding that we haven't actually made that motion yet for either item, whether to table or postpone yet. So under that belief, I'm going to ask for that explanation from Attorney Rogers about that, the process. And I appreciate everyone bearing with us on this. I don't know if we've done a postpone indefinitely during my time on council ever, so we're learning on this as we go to make sure. So we really appreciate that. Mr. Rogers, can you shed some light on that? For Councilmember Cruz's
the way
question.
I understand motion to table, there would have to be a subsequent motion to remove from the table and take up the item. A motion to postpone consideration of this vote would be delayed until the agenda item were placed back on council agenda. They're very similar, but I'm not sure what council's aim here is, what the goal is. Simply postponing consideration of this contract, you can just move to postpone indefinitely. Table means the matter is done and over with unless someone moves to remove from the table.
Okay. Bring it back by referral, I think is what he's after, or what's that process?
Yeah, or and I believe, if I remember right, if you do a motion to table, that matter has to be brought up in the same meeting or the next subsequent meeting, or it's lost. So what I'm hearing from you, I think you want to you want a postponement indefinitely
Okay.
to achieve some of the things you're talking about.
All right. And Mr. Gaines has just arrived at the dais.
Would
again.
concur with
is there,
that.
for Mr. Is there a question or a comment from Mr. Gaines?
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess maybe what I would do is suggest that it's an up or down vote. And the reason I would suggest that is maybe we can kick it out to goal setting if that's a little bit longer time that you want to talk about it. But if we just have a postpone indefinitely, the consultant's not going to wait forever. Prices are going to go up, prices are going to change. So I would suggest an up or down vote.
Okay. Did all council hear that? Do
Mayor?
you need a repeat? Go ahead, Councilmember Cruz.
Again, I'm going to new normal, and we have a consultant that's got experience, but the studies change, and COVID is changing the world, behaviors, socially, economically. So how is that built into the contract? And we rushed to do a study, but the variables we're relying on to do the study change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm going back, based on what Mr. Rogers is saying, it sounds like postponing with the option to bring back most any time seems to be the route to go.
Well, the one problem with that, as I understand from Mr. Gaines, is that even with the postponement, you're locked into the current contract language, and that may not be applicable by the time we're ready to bring it back up again in 6 months or 9 months or a year from now. So his concern, which I understand, is not wanting to be locked into or try to think that we're locked into a contract or we can use that contract when it's going to be moot, and the consultant may not want to even use that contract in the future. So that's where he's suggesting the smarter move would be just a straight up or down vote. And I will commit as mayor to keep this front and center and to bring it forward as needed. So it certainly isn't that it's a means to kill it entirely, but just to bring it up at the appropriate time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Sires?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Sires is speaking first.
One quick short question. Who brought this forward? What community group asked for this study?
City Council.
So I think Mr. Miller's correct. This was presented by Eric Giddens of UNI, where I think several council members asked him to come forward. There were several presentations done. City staff came back with a presentation, presented that to the city council. I believe we had a unanimous vote. It was also mentioned in our goal setting that we would move forward with the climate action plan, sustainability, and whatever we're calling it now. But so it was, this is a directive from the city council. It looks like city staff's up here having to defend this, but this really came from the city council. So.
Okay. Thank you. So
Mr. Gaines?
I can't see faces right now, so who chimed in first?
Go ahead, Mark.
I guess to that point, this came up in goal. It was discussed in goal setting. We talked about it for several years, and I'm sure everybody's aware of this. But if we push this out for 2 months and we don't have it before goal setting, we're pretty well setting the stage for this to sit for another year before we get back to it. And for myself, I understand Mr. Cruz's point. I understand Mr. Tiber's point, but I think we have to get to that baseline. And a study like this isn't intended to be the same from here to eternity. It's going to change. It's going to morph. Prices come down. Prices go up. All sorts of things change. But to get to the baseline, so we have this, so we have something to reference, I feel like we need to hire a consultant. I mean, you look back to the 2025 visioning plan. There has to be a champion, because the amount of information and the amount of things that go into to a comprehensive plan like this, there has to be somebody that takes the lead. Otherwise, it's going to sit on the shelf. So I feel like we have to get at least a baseline of data and a direction, and then we can go forward from there. But for myself, if we don't have this by goal setting in November, we're pretty well securing that we're not going to discuss it until goal setting the following year. And we budgeted for it. We planned for it. I know there's going to be changes with COVID-19 and how everyone moves, I guess, if you will, but I feel like we need to move forward with it. It's been a goal of the council. It's been a goal of many people in the community. I don't feel like we should wait on it.
Okay. And Councilmember Harding?
Yeah, we did talk about it at goal setting, and it would give us a great baseline. I know a lot of people in the community do want to do something like this. I guess, Mr. Gaines, you did mention that we could work with the firm to kind of make sure the scope of the study covers a little bit more other than the carbon emissions, correct? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Just making sure. That's my main concern.
All right, thank you. And I believe we've heard really all sides that we need to on this. We have the information that's needed. Is there any other questions or need any more information for a decision? Okay, seeing none, then I'm going to close this discussion, and or I know that we need a motion that's already been on the floor.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say that I'd like to retract my motion to put.
Okay, so that's
up here.
Okay. And so that brings
I
us.
move approval.
Say again.
This is Frank. I move approval.
I believe we already had that, didn't we?
Do we have it?
Yep.
Call the question.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yes. Well, you can call the question.
Call the question.
Okay. So what's on the floor currently, unamended, unchanged, is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement with Perkins and Will relative to developing a resilience plan for the city of Cedar Falls. It's already been motioned and seconded, so this requires a roll call vote.
Sorry. Miller?
Aye.
DeBoer?
No.
Cruz?
Aye.
Aye. Harding?
Aye.
Dara?
Aye.
Sires?
Nay.
Tiber?
Aye.
4 voting aye, 3 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and I appreciate the excellent discussion. Those are difficult items sometimes, and I know there was great comments and thoughts from both sides. So I appreciate the council and the public's willingness to engage in this. And that'll bring us over to our next item on the agenda, which is a motion or allowing bills and payrolls. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve bills and
Second.
payroll.
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Miller?
Aye.
DeBoer?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Dara?
Aye.
Sires? Tiber?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item is city council referrals. Do we have any referrals tonight from council? Seeing none, moving to the city council updates.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
This is something I wanted to highlight. I've gotten a number of complaints from people with COVID-19. Many people are working from home, and they're out doing walks in the streets. And it's been pointed out to me, and I've seen it happen myself, that many of the citizens are walking down the middle of the streets. And I had an opportunity through Director Olson to research our city code, and it says in section 23-599, where sidewalks are provided, it shall be unlawful for any pedestrian to walk along on any adjacent roadway. And this is obvious for the safety of the people, not to be walking in the street, travel portion of the street, or any portion of the roadway, that people need to be staying on the sidewalks when they're provided. I just wanted to throw that comment out there because I've had some concerns brought to me, and some members of the community didn't like when I was pointing this out to them, but it is indeed in our city code. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other updates from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Sires.
I have something, Aldrich School. When we talked about it at goal setting, we all agreed that we would move that forward and have a street put into that school and look for an easement and look for these other things. And now when we're pushing ahead with this study, I think it's a little more important that we push ahead with our Aldrich School Street. I wondered how we were doing with that. I guess maybe Chase is the one I should ask.
So that is correct. What came out of goal setting is to move forward with kind of the first initial steps of looking into that. I know our engineering division has been doing some survey. I know Director Sheets has been in communication with some of the property owners along that corridor. So we are working on it currently. I do not have a date for when we would acquire any of that to have public improvements installed, but we are currently working on it. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just real quick, an added comment on that is that was a project that was budgeted in CIP for FY21. So really work won't begin on, a lot of work won't begin on that till after the fiscal year begins.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gaines. Other council updates? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to staff updates. So, Mr. Gaines, I believe you're anything to, okay, so there's no other staff updates. I will open now then to public forum, and speakers will have up to 5 minutes to speak on topics germane to city business. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak tonight?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our meeting, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been motioned and
So moved.
seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.